How should I deal with my husband's issues with my parents? I, F36, am so confused with what my husband, M44, is wanting. Today he lashed out because he was tired, frustrated and annoyed. When he is that way he harks up about the issues he's having with my parents. In this case he was complaining about the things he had to do and proceeded to complain about the fact that my parents weren't around and that they only look out for themselves. I have to point out the fact that a few months ago, my dad asked me to offer my husband a chance to have a heart-to-heart with him about what was going on and wanting to hear what he had to say and if they could fix it. I told my husband this and he said that it was quote-unquote, too little too late. Okay. Well, that sounded pretty final to me, and though it cut me to the core that he wasn't being receptive, I said nothing about it. To go back to the present day, my husband went on his little spiel and was of the opinion that just because those words were said didn't mean they, my parents, shouldn't stop trying to make it right. Exploding head like, are you serious right now? You go on rants about how fucking selfish they are, how they're fuckwits, and you're saying you want them back in your life or out. I'm so fucking befuddled. Am I right to think he's being ridiculous? How should I deal with this? Because I seriously don't know how much longer I can take of this shit. I feel like I'm staring down the barrel of years spent listening to him rant about how wronged he's been. I don't think it will change. When he's tired, frustrated and stressed, that's what happens. Too long did not read. Husband can't seem to make up his mind if he wants my parents in his life. I don't know how to address this. ETA. A lot of people have asked for extra detail, so I apologize for not being thorough enough. I'm dealing with 3 under 4, so my time is not my own. I detailed some experiences in a past post, but I'll try and add more here. So basically my parents are not typical parents, whatever that means, which is slightly unusual for our background being ethnic, think around Middle East. They're young, they travel, they're athletic and live a full life outside of their children and grandchildren. I'm used to their lifestyle, and would have the house to myself for months on end while they went away. Irregardless, I could always count on their support for anything. One year they flew out for a couple of months, but there ended up being a situation at home that they took the next flight back home for. So it wasn't as if they wouldn't come if we asked. In comes my husband. Initially he gave the impression of being quite laid back. His parents are different to mine. They're older and they live solely for their kids and grandkids. So that means doing things for us even when we don't ask. They're really lovely people and they mean well. My husband, I think deep down, does a comparison between him and my parents. He feels like his parents do so much for me personally, or they go out of their way. He doesn't feel the same love from my side. Keeping in mind that my relationship with my parents isn't dependent on how much they do for me or when they call me, and I don't think he can get over that because by extension, it's the same for him. Mind you, even if it's not their thing, they have messaged and called him because I've told him he likes that. My dad would even go and send him coffees at his clinic when he would go past to visit me. Work and home are in the same area for us. He feels like my parents haven't done enough to support us. It's those little things which have added up in his mind. My parents were due to sell the family home to buy somewhere that was easier for my grandmother. We offered to buy it from him, as dad would sometimes ask me over the years if I wanted it. In the end my dad was like, if you want it as an investment property, it's not going to work as it's very old and needs heaps of work. You're better off investing in commercial properties because leases can go for years. I didn't think much of this change of mind. They're allowed to do what they want, but my husband was annoyed and thought it was a snub that they didn't want our money or for us to buy the property. Woman shrugging, light skin tone. He feels like they should have done more to bridge the gap between my older sibling and I, as we aren't in contact because, funnily enough, spouse problems on their end too. My mum never apologized for a comment she made in jest a few years ago, as she believed she didn't mean any harm and my dad supported her. They've gotten pissed off with how I've been under pressure, and as I made a comment in the thread, I'll have to reiterate here, but I was only a couple of months postpartum when I got stressed to the point of walking out the door late at night after consuming a questionable amount of pills. He was on my case yet again about the lack of help we'd had. Instead of going to the source of misery, he came to me, and I was already dealing with the trauma of our third babe's birth and hormones. I wasn't in the best headspace. Long story short, they couldn't deal with that and haven't spoken to him directly for a few months now. We all got COVID, including the now 7-month-old, and though I kept him updated as they were worried, they still didn't get in touch with him or delivered anything to us like my husband thought they should have. I'm sure there are other things, but it's something. It seems like there's a lot being left out here. What, exactly, is your husband's problem with your parents? Your syntax is very Irish. You can be loyal to your husband by setting boundaries with him and your parents. It's not okay for you to talk about him behind his back to your parents. Likewise, it's not okay for him to demean the people you care about, especially if your parents are also grandparents. He's trying to isolate you from your parents. He's exhausting you so much you'll cut him off or significantly reduce contact to keep the peace. Reality check time. Your parents could be literal saints and your husband is not ever, in any literal circumstance, required to like them or want any kind of a relationship with them beyond the barest minimum. If that's a deal breaker for you, that's fine, but know you may have to choose between him and your marriage, which is a sad reality for many people. I had an ex choose parents who were very abusive. I am fine with this and chose my own safety. But there has to be something you're hiding here. TBH, sorry, but I'm inclined to be on husband's side in this one. Do you want your parents in your life? Is your answer compatible with your marriage? Proceed from there. So what's the actual issue he has with your parents? They're selfish? Okay. I mean, so are my in-laws, but I had to accept that and move along. I don't make it my husband's problem or bring it up constantly. Your husband either needs to accept this is who they are, or try to work things out, if there's some specific, actionable thing. But bringing it up and being awful about it isn't the way. Who has the energy for that? If you don't mean it, don't say it. Simple as that. Your husband is childish for not at least taking the branch extended by your father, who seems to want and try to bridge whatever gap there is. Sit him down and have a talk. Tell him that if he yells, you will end the conversation. It's supposed to be a conversation and not a screaming match. Your husband sounds like a horrible and annoying person. Is it only like that to your parents? You shouldn't, he needs to. Your husband sounds infuriating. I would honestly just keep quoting his own words back to him. Perhaps he'll eventually grasp what he sounds like. It seemed like you've had enough of it and now you want to fix this whole situation, which seemed very complicated, especially your husband's point of view. I'll suggest you to give him some alone time and give him an open choice what he really wants and make your decision upon that, whether you want to stay or not with him anymore. Are your parents awful? That's what's important in this story. The validity of his reactions are contingent on this. If it's anything like my situation, it's because they're terrible people and master manipulators. I'm wondering about cultural context. Are the parents an ethnicity that the husband doesn't understand? They might be behaving how parents-in-law behave in their culture. He misinterprets it. The wife doesn't really notice because she's culturally aware and probably doesn't even realize. Perhaps. Your parents can't be a scapegoat for every little thing he doesn't like about his life. He's using him as an outlet so that he doesn't have to face the truth about the consequences of his own behavior and his poor emotion regulation skills. He's 44, he needs therapy to deal with his anger, about his own parents too, I'm guessing, or he needs to decide if he wants to be in this marriage, because attacking your parents when he has insisted on no contact with them is crap. What was the comment your mom made? Your husband sounds incredibly entitled. I read your whole post after the edit. Is this how you want your kids to feel about you when they grow up? Do you want your kids to expect for you to be there supporting them well into adulthood? You are the ones that chose to have kids. Your parents don't have to uproot their lives to revolve around their kids and grandkids. I'd tell your husband to shut up. If he needs someone to rant to, then I'm sure he has a friend or brother or dog or someone else to rant to. OMG, and you have 3 littlies. I sympathize. You have listened, tried to organize the peace pipe, and yet he won't try and make a difference. Counseling sounds great either for him or for you both. In the meantime, every time he starts complaining about them, just say, I love you and I love them but don't know how to fix things, and walk away. End of discussion. Unless your parents are really toxic and you're just not seeing it, it sounds like your husband needs to grow up. He can't decide if he wants a relationship with them or not. They're your parents. What's wrong with him? He should be fostering as good a relationship with them as he can for your sake. That's what we all do for our spouses. Lots of people can't stand their in-laws. They grin and bear it and are as civil as possible because unless they're a big baby, they don't want to make life difficult and stressful for their spouse. He needs to get over himself. I have a sibling like this. Never know what they'll take offense to, but they'll definitely take offense. They'll expect you to do everything that they want and the way they want. Having not shared any of this thought process with you until they're angry and taking their own frustration out on you. It comes down to shitty communication and unrealistically high standards. And I'll tell ya, I wouldn't want to be married to someone like them. I would try family therapy and most definitely individual therapy for him, and maybe you too. This is a lot to shoulder. There's a lot of missing info in your post. Could your hubby have a point? How did this enmity start? Cut contact, because this will never stop. I'm sorry. From my own experience with me and other men like this. There is something deeper that is bugging him. Have you guys suggested therapy? Typically men, myself included, just need to rant for a few minutes. The best thing to do for a guy like us is to just laugh at him when his rants are going. Yeah, tell him to STFU since he wants to put zero effort into actually talk to your parents. I am annoyed just reading this. They shouldn't have to run after him to make things right. It's a two-way street. All relationships are a two-way street. Shut him down. Just walk away when he rants. Do not enter into any discussion etc. about your parents with him. Just say, I'm not talking about this anymore, and walk away. Your husband truly sounds a tosser. Sorry. He needs STFU. Your parents have nothing to do with his reason for ranting. Send him to therapy to figure it out. Your husband feels entitled to something very specific from your parents. Sounds like he feels entitled to a shit ton of stuff from you, too. If there is a lot of very good unmentioned to balance out this serious negativity, then you have to set a boundary. He can't change your parents. You can't change your parents. If he can't handle independent in-laws, he should leave. If he wants to stay, he needs to accept who they are and stop taking it out on you. Fully, even if there is a ton of great things and you want to stay with him, if he can't honor this boundary, the relationship won't work. Your post is very long-winded and confusing, without a lot of details. Bottom line, your parents are not obligated to you, your husband, and your kids. Same with his parents. They can lead their own lives. Your husband is also 44, middle age, and should not be behaving this way. What is the actual source of this? Why doesn't he get along with your parents? You've basically introduced us to a story that's 75% of the way through and asking us what you should do in the last 25%. How should we know, without more context? Your dad outright made an offer to have a sit-down, get it all out on the table and hash everything out. This is what you do when enough resentment and anger has built up out of things that have been said and done and issues that are unresolved. If your husband refuses, he really doesn't have grounds to keep complaining. An offer was made, he declined. Meanwhile, he's taking it out on you. He's being completely unfair and it's uncalled for. Even with more context, I'm still going to need a lot more context. There is some serious lack of genuine detail over what exactly your husband is upset about and what exactly your parents did or didn't do. It sounds like this has been going on for a while. I would tell him to either make an attempt to make it right himself, which your parents seem receptive to, or shut the fuck up about it. If he isn't going to do anything about the situation, then he doesn't get to complain about it. Your post is super vague about what the source of the conflict is, has been, and focuses only on your husband's current reaction. If he's been through a lot and has made good faith efforts in the past that haven't worked out or have been rebuffed by your parents, then he may justifiably be frustrated and fed up. It would also be helpful to know if you've been supportive of your husband throughout the conflicts. Your post makes it sound like you just want him to be over it just like that or to deal with it. Generally, if the problem is your parents, you should have been dealing with this all along, as they will listen to you and you're the bridge between him and them. I think couples therapy would be the best way to address this. What is his problem with your parents? Did they do something to him or you, or does he just not like them? Okay, I glanced through your post history. Your husband is a controlling asshole. Your parents have done nothing wrong, and neither have you. Your husband wants to dictate every aspect of your life, and that desire for control extends to your parents as well. Your parents seem supportive and healthy, so of course that's a threat to his control. I think you need to tell us what actually their issue is with each other. What's your husband's relationship with your parents like? You've given us zero context. Hard to sort through what's going on and give advice without any specifics. Are you entirely sure his issues with your parents are a problem he wants to fix? Or do you suppose he might value those issues more as a tool to bludgeon you and your parents with whenever he feels like it? If he were to make peace with them, I assume they wouldn't have to keep striving to make it up to him, whatever it might be. Why on earth would he want that when instead they can owe him forever? Maybe he sees this less as a solvable problem, and more as an immutable state of affairs he can perpetually benefit from. Therapist. Or shut the hell up. End of story. What did your parents do? The fact you aren't be forthcoming speaks volumes. Info: what events occurred between your husband and parents? It sounds like this a long-running thing, but your post is unclear about what events have led to the current situation. My mum never apologized for a comment she made in jest a few years ago as she believed she didn't mean any harm and my dad supported her. You mentioned she said something that really bothered your husband, but you don't actually say what it is, and immediately dismiss his feelings, which sounds similar to what your mom did. She doesn't get to decide how he took her comment, just as your husband doesn't get to decide how his comments impact you. You're very descriptive when detailing your husband's faults, but are incredibly vague when discussing anything that's been done to him. This post makes zero sense. There is absolutely no context and it's like you started in the middle of the post, leaving out any relevant information. Literally no idea what you're talking about here. You didn't explain what has happened. Impossible to have an opinion. Some things are unforgivable. Well, what is his issue with your parents? I don't think it's really about your folks at this point. He gets upset and wants to vent, so he pulls out the old tried and true, "It's your parents causing me all this unhappiness." Then he throws in whatever else he can to keep the rant going. Sounds like he needs some counseling to deal with handling his stress in a better way. Not saying your folks aren't an issue or that he doesn't have some legitimate grievances, if he does, but I'd be so tired of hearing about it for the umpteenth time. I'd give him a stern talking to and tell him that this is an old subject, he's beaten it to death, get counseling or you absolutely don't want to hear about it and you'll leave the room or even the house every time he starts on another unproductive rant. Have made an edit in the main post everyone. Looks like your husband just has high expectations of what parents are supposed to do when you're full adults and married. He's gotten lucky with his parents providing for you all and now feels like your parents aren't meeting expectations just because they live different lives. He just needs to learn to appreciate his own parents more as well as yours and realize that your parents don't owe him anything. He's an adult. Also frustrating that he's on your case about it, but whenever you try to communicate that your parents want to talk to him, he just turns away and says, "Too little too late." Kinda seems like he just wants to stay mad about it. At this point I would tell him that you're tired of dealing with all of this and that if he wants to be an adult, to go to your parents directly.